Hello, I'm DK Johnston, and welcome to Alaska Filmmakers, a series dedicated to exploring the many talented individuals working in the Alaska film community. In our final episode of Series 2, we're joined by Juneau filmmaker Patrick Race. Patrick is a founding member of the Juneau Underground Motion Picture Society, and together with his group AK Robotics, has worked to produce and promote independent filmmaking in Southeast Alaska. Host Joshua Lowman joined Patrick at the Alaska Experience Theater to talk about the film community in Juneau.
So Pat, how did you get started in production?
Production is kind of a funny word for me because I do some commercial work, but a lot of what I do is just sort of for fun. And so, and with the bigger film work that's happening in Alaska, I feel like production means this whole nest of people and very large-scale projects that involve hierarchy. And for me, production is like sitting down at my computer and making something. And so it's a very different idea of what production is. How I got started in production is just sort of, I was a kid and I made little movies, and then I became an adult who made movies. And so that was how I got started in production.
You'd mentioned with more production coming up here, are you seeing much of that in Juneau?
I'm not seeing any of it in Juneau, but there may be other people that are doing it. I know there's been people in Juneau that have come up here to try out for acting roles and have come up to Anchorage to work on sets and things like that. But we haven't seen a lot of like that stir of excitement in Juneau. And I don't know if there's, I think that a lot of towns in Alaska are kind of experiencing the same thing, where there's a big flurry of activity in Anchorage because everything's very centralized. But it's a little harder to get that in the small communities unless there's an actual production happening there, and it's not as spread out as all that.
Well, what kind of commercial work have you done?
I've done a ton of commercial work. I've done actual television commercials. I've done documentaries. I'm working on a piece for the University of Alaska right now, documenting rural Native students attending the university. I did a piece for the Taylor White Foundation, which was about a 30-minute documentary about a kid who died in a drunk driving accident, we tried to not make it the typical, like, hey, don't drink and drive, and it was very local and very powerful for the people who were involved in it, and very taxing for me as a filmmaker. I've worked a lot with Joel Bennett as an editor. I've edited films in Tlingit and in Danish, and that's really hard to edit in foreign languages. So you kind of have to guess where the pauses are and make that cut and glue it together, and then sit down with someone that knows what they're talking about, and then they're like, oh yes, that's perfect. And then they get to the point and they're like, why did you cut it in the middle of the sentence? Well, I don't speak the language, so it's, yeah. So I've done all kinds of stuff. I'm kind of a jack of all trades. Our town, Juneau, is like 30,000 people, and so as a media firm there, we kind of have to do a little bit of everything to stay afloat. And so I consider myself more of a breadth person than a depth person. I feel like I have a lot of skills, but none of them are particularly honed.
Between working on documentaries and narrative, do you have a preference to which one you'd rather work on?
I love the process of editing and creating narrative films. Documentary is a lot of fun because you don't have to organize people. You can kind of have an idea of what you want to shoot, and you can go out and capture that. And then tell that story. So documentary is more accessible to me, I feel like, but I don't really have a preference.
It seems like there's a lot of documentaries coming out of Juneau now. Is that something that you've noticed, or?
Part of that may be, we do workshops and things like that, and I feel like after we do workshops, people get inspired to work on those type of things. And we did a workshop not too long ago about the art of the interview. We brought up a filmmaker from Seattle to sort of teach a class and help out the local filmmakers. And so I think that when that kind of thing happens in a small community, the ripples sort of spread out, and all of a sudden everyone's working on documentaries, or everyone's trying to write a screenplay, or now people are interested in doing better storyboards and that sort of thing. So I don't know if particularly there are more documentaries coming out of Juneau, or but I do think that for other people too, they're accessible. It's difficult in a small town to try and make a narrative film, and you always end up relying on like family and friends, and it's not like a professional production ever.
What is the film community like in Juneau?
The film community in Juneau is really, I don't know, I think it's really beautiful. There's a lot of different people involved. We have little kids that make movies for classes, and we teach film classes occasionally for them, and then we have people who have done like world-class wildlife photography and videography, like Joel Bennett, that contribute to the film festival, and not necessarily in that form, but he'll do like a film that's a kind of an experiment for him, like he'll do a documentary or a narrative film. And then we've got everything in between. So we've got people that are like our age that are aspiring filmmakers that are really trying to hone their craft, and then we've got people that are moms and dads that are trying to do it as a way to connect with their children. One of the filmmakers in Juneau, Greg Cheney, he's been making films since the beginning of our film festival, which is about 10 years ago now, and he started out just doing it as like family project time, and so a way to connect with his his kids or his kid and his wife, and they would make fun little short films, and they got better and better. And he recently made a film that has been selected to screen at Banff for the Mountain Film Festival, which is really exciting. Actually, there's 2 filmmakers from Juneau that are going to be part of the traveling show with Banff for this year, and so that's kind of a feather in our cap as a filmmaking community. It's something I'm really proud of.
Tell me more about the J.U.M.P Society.
Yeah, so the J.U.M.P Society is the Juneau Underground Motion Picture Society, and it started as a way to screen films collectively. I have always liked making short films and sharing them with people, but and I like doing that in a theater environment. It's a lot more meaningful, I think, than doing it online, because you just sort of cast it out into the darkness. But I like having an audience there, and you can really gauge people's reactions and experience it with them, and it's a more meaningful thing to me. And so the J.U.M.P Society provides screening opportunities for local filmmakers, and the idea was that, well, no one's going to come and watch our 4-minute movie, so we need to get a bunch of 4-minute movies and put them all together, and then we've got a show. And so we do that twice a year, and we typically get 20 to 25 submissions from locals, and then we screen what ends up being about an hour and a half worth of short films, and usually plays to sell out crowds, and we do about 5 or 6 shows. And it's been really successful, it's been really fun, and we try to keep it really accessible. In the past, when we've had too many submissions, we try to trim it down not based on what necessarily is the highest production value, but based on trying to get everyone a little slice of screen time.
Is there any kind of criteria on those?
Yeah, our biggest criteria is that all the films have to be 10 minutes or less. And then beyond that, we really don't hold people to much more. I mean, it can be any genre, anything, and we try to put the more adult films, like if there's nudity or violence or language or whatever, we try and put that towards the end of the festival, and then make an announcement that, okay, so the end of the festival, the last 4 or 5 films are for a more adult audience, and if you have kids here, you might not want to have them stick around. But a lot of times it's not that bad, it's pretty tame, and generally the whole show can be consumed by most audiences.
What's the actor community like down there?
We've got an amazing community of actors. I feel like as a film group, we need to connect with them more, but we have Perseverance Theater in Juneau, which is like a world-class theater, and just stellar. They do amazing productions, and they bring amazing people to town. They tried to make a film several years ago. I think it was when I was in college, so it must have been probably like 12 to 15 years ago now. And I think that was really taxing for them. I think it was a direction they wanted to go, and it didn't work out as well as they'd wanted it to. And so I think that they kind of stepped back from that. But I feel like now it would be a good time to approach them and to try and see if there's more things that we can collaborate on. But they have an amazing group of actors. And then there's also Theater in the Rough, which is they recently won a governor's award for the arts or something like that. It was but they're a small troupe and tend to work together, and they do incredible productions too. So there are a lot of really talented actors in town, but they're mostly like stage actors, and they kind of need that help moving to screen.
Being a filmmaker down in Juneau, do you guys connect much with the other southeast and south central islands?
Bob Shorts is a group out of Anchorage that came down and about the time we got started, and really pushed us to get going as a film festival in Juneau as a local event. But really there's not a lot of partnerships with people outside. I'd say actually the ones that we've had the most promise from is Whitehorse, which is just up the road. You can take a ferry to Skagway and then drive up the road and you're in Whitehorse. And they've got just a really well-funded film society there, the Yukon Film Society, I believe is what it's called. And Canada has a history of really supporting the arts through the film board, and that group's kind of tied in with that.
So tell me more about Alaska Robotics and how that came about.
Okay, so we have a small business, Lucid Reverie, which we started in 2001. And we do media production, a lot of website design, video production, and that's where a lot of the commercial work comes in. And then and we started doing that as a way to pay the bills and feed ourselves, but we really wanted to do a lot of our own personal projects and things that we enjoyed more. So, and that's the kind of thing that we screened through the film festival. And in 2007, we decided that it needed a name or a label or something. And so Alaska Robotics is kind of like the fun branch of our business. It's comics and short films, and it's all personal stuff. And if someone comes to us with work for hire, we don't call it Alaska Robotics. We just want to make a clear distinction between what we're doing for ourselves and what we're doing for clients.
You just mentioned comics. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I do webcomics. Actually, recently got back into it. Started about the same time, 2007, started doing weekly webcomics for quite a while, and then sort of fell off the wagon about a year ago and did some scattered ones, but now I'm doing it more regularly again. And I just really like drawing. I like illustration. It's a similar way to tell a story. I consider myself a visual artist, like a visual storyteller, say. And I feel like filmmaking and comics really allow me to do that in a personal way. I think that's why I gravitate towards short films, is because it allows me to tell a story that's very personal in a way that I want to, and that if you've seen my films, that might sound kind of like a joke. But you do get to have a lot of, there's a lot of voice in a short film that gets lost, I think, sometimes in a larger film. Some larger films are able to maintain that, and those are the really beautiful ones.
So your business is above a comic book shop?
Yeah, we've got it's actually part of our business. So we have a small office in Juneau, and it's for Lou and Aaron and I all work there and work on our commercial productions and websites and things like that. And then the front room we use is like a gallery space and also carry comic books. And so that's just been a lot of fun for us. We try to invest in our community as much as we can, and I feel like that means my responsibility is to bring good comic books to town.
So did you go to school for any of the filmmaking or art?
I went to, my education history is that I went to school at UAF and studied computer science. And while at UAF, I was fortunate enough to be able to take this animation class about 6 times over. It was taught by Bill Brody, and it was one of those things where Ted Stevens threw a bunch of money at something, and so there was, the Department of Defense had a bunch of money for these supercomputers up there, the Arctic Region Supercomputing Center, and part of what they had money for was animation software that they used for doing modeling, but was also conveniently the same stuff that professional studios were using, and the precursor to Maya and like the Alias software. And so when Maya came out, that was what we started using, and so I got to train a little bit on that and over again, and that was an opportunity as an undergrad that at that time I probably wouldn't have had anywhere else, but it was also a small slice of what I was doing as a computer science major. My senior year, well, I guess not technically, my second senior year of college, I had one English class to finish up, and so me and a bunch of my friends got together and said, hey, we do all these creative projects in our spare time, let's make that our focus for a year, because we're all going to be here, we've got very little work to do to finish up school, and this could be an actual opportunity to pursue this in an academic environment. And so we called it the Alaska Renaissance Project, and we wrote a book of creative writing, and we did computer game, and we did the computer game based on the Serum Run, and we did and like kind of based on Oregon Trail too. And then we did a feature-length film that was just awful. And then we did a whole bunch of campus events. And actually, that was probably one of the best things that came out of it. Is that one of the campus events we did up there was a film festival, and that's kind of where I got started as a curator of locally made short films. And so this is like 2000, 2001. We had some really big fun shows in Fairbanks, and that evolved into Lou, who works with me, kind of took that to the next level along with some other folks that were going to school up there, and it became the UAF Film Club, which I think may be around in some form or may have kind of morphed into part of the theater department / film degree thing that's going on now. So I'm excited that it's kind of evolved beyond us. And then we took it in our own direction in Juneau by doing the same kind of screenings there. As far as actual education in film, I did go down and do this 3-week intensive at the film school in Seattle, which was an amazing organization. It's for screenwriters, and it's basically, you've got 3 weeks to go there and learn they like teach you an acting class for screenwriters that's like, okay, you need to learn that people are going to have to say the stupid stuff that you write. So here, now you are the person that has to say it. So we did this little like acting bit, and it was great because it really helps you improve your writing. And then we met with a bunch of different screenwriters, like Christopher McQuarrie came in and talked to us, the guy that did Usual Suspects. We had some really good time with him. Stuart Stern was one of the teachers there. He wrote the screenplay for Rebel Without a Cause, and a number of other things. It's just an amazing, like, kind of in the realm of treasure. Yeah, he is a treasure. He's a beautiful man, and it was really fun to go down there and be around other people that were interested in telling stories. And so I think that's my only legitimate like film school education. And because I'm so spread out, like I said, I feel like I'm more of a breadth than a depth person. I haven't really figured out what to explore specifically. Like, do I want to do animation? Do I want to, do I want to further investigate screenwriting? Am I happy making short films? How do I want to tell my stories? Is kind of where I'm at.
Have you gone back to animation at all, or is it kind of just film and comics?
No, I do some animation still. We're doing a screening tonight, and there's a couple films in there that are animated. And when I say animation, it's like sometimes it's hand drawn, sometimes it's stop motion. A lot of my animation projects are kind of these like things that got started and then kind of aborted halfway through. Like there's actually a collection in this screening that's a bunch of animated scraps that never really got anywhere, like little experimental things. And those are kind of fun to share because I had to go dig them out. And I was like, whoa, I did that. That's kind of, I've forgotten. And yeah, it's really important to experiment, I think, as a filmmaker, to push yourself in different directions and kind of remember what you learned in doing that.
So do you have any upcoming projects right now?
Yes. Yes, he says about that. Yeah, I've got some upcoming projects. I don't know what they are though. Like I'm working on a couple screenplays. I'm working on some short films. I recently shot some footage for a typewriter documentary. I'm editing a project for the university, and I've got a Rasmussen grant to look into doing a film on, it would be like a documentary film on colonialism in Alaska, which sounds really boring, but is very exciting to me. And the thing I kind of want to explore, and I don't even know if I can do this because it might be too big of a project, but I want to explore Alaska's history as a colony, and not just as like a not just as people coming in and taking over a space, but as a like with corporate colonialism, with the oil companies and the mines and fish harvesting, and just how Alaska is, and even the film industry is a good example of how Alaska is used by outside places and then sort of discarded once that use is dried up. And so I think that there are some aspects of Alaskan identity that I really want to explore, that go back to our history of Russians coming in and killing a bunch of native people and taking over the land. And I think that kind of thing is still happening today in a different form. And that kind of grew out of it grew out of something that my interest in that story came out of the Vico scandal, because people didn't seem surprised that a bunch of legislators were taking bribes and selling votes. They seemed surprised that they'd been caught and that something was being done about it, and that was something I wanted to explore more. I feel like we have kind of this frontiersy political scene here, and I'd really like to sort of ask some questions about it, and so I think that's a project I might work on, but I think it's going to be more of a long-term thing.
If for someone who's just starting out, what kind of advice would you give them?
Well, it depends on what you're starting out doing. I think for someone that's starting out, like, go and make movies that are fun to make, and go and do the things that you enjoy doing, and it will kind of evolve into what you're supposed to be doing. Follow your passion. Like, if you love drawing, then maybe animation's your thing. If you just like telling a story, maybe screenwriting's your thing. But try it all and get as involved as you can and stay as positive as possible. Don't let it's really easy in production for things to get drugged down or political or whatever, and if you can just float above that, you'll do a lot better.
That's all the time we have today in Alaska Filmmakers. To learn more about Patrick and the Juneau film community, visit our website at alaskafilmmakers.com. We'd like to thank Patrick for joining us on the show today, as well as the Alaska Experience Theater, the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and Alaska Pacific University for their hospitality during Season 2. We'd like to thank our viewers, sponsors, and supporters for helping make Alaska Filmmakers Series 2 a reality. And I personally like to thank all of our cast and crew here at AKF for another great season. And until next time, remember, everyone has a story to tell.